So I enjoyed a lovely Power Greens juice with ginger in it.
Oh,
Now I'm having
That
hot
sounds-
lemon and honey.
well, that'll make up for it. You like lemon. The honey will.
It's delicious.
Yeah, that's a reward. Okay, the
So-
corn's going to have to be the reward for me. That's a
Yeah.
good reward.
Well, you like beets, don't you?
I just watch them. They seem to
Oh, that's right.
trigger my lactose intolerance, but I don't
know
think
how.
they've got lactose in them.
Nope.
Anyway, they get me really going.
Anyway.
More sense of the word going. Anyway, you want to talk? I don't have much time. I got to get ready for.
Okay, we're
University
doing
course.
the last session of the review of sacred texts of the world. So,
Starring Grant Hardy.
Yep. And I think I left off at lecture 31, so that's where I'm going to start. Holy Quran, one God who is just and merciful. Those who reject him will suffer, though. Rhythm and rhyme of the original Arabic doesn't come through in translation. The cow is the longest surah in Quran. Only 6 of the 286 verses discuss the sacrifice of a heifer by the ancient Israelites. According to Surah 45, Arabs at the time did not believe in any kind of life after death, but the angel Gabriel brought to Muhammad the surah on resurrection, 75. The story about Jesus making birds out of clay, as in the infancy Gospel of Thomas, is present in the Quran. Many characters from the Bible are also found in the Quran. In Islam, God is not so much a heavenly father. He is an absolute monarch or a divine king who calls for submission and obedience. In the Quran, Jesus was born from a virgin, but he was not the Son of God. He was a human and a prophet who God saved from death on the cross by taking him directly up to paradise, but he'll return on the last day. The Quran is a replacement for the Bible. It's God's complete and final word. Muslims used to face Jerusalem to pray instead of Mecca. Muslims believe that the Quran is in Arabic is God's direct speech, unmediated and uninterpreted. The Quran is God's final revelation, and Muhammad is the seal of the prophets. The Quran existed in heaven before the world began. The Quran is perfect and inimitable. Muslims see little distinction between sacred and secular matters in a life that is entirely devoted to God. That was from the book, page 223. Men are allowed to have up to 4 wives. A daughter receives only half the inheritance of a son. That was page 225, I think. The Quran condemned the pre-Islamic practice of female infanticide, though, and made it clear that women and men are equal in their relationship with God. That's a quote from the book, page 225, I think. Anyway.
From this book?
I think, yep.
Okay.
If you look at page 225. Many of the traditions that we today associate with Islam arose after the Prophet Muhammad. So what I was doing here is I was reading through the book again while I was watching the thing. So some is from the book and some is from, well, all the stuff I think that's in the book is in the video. So I think you should be able to find all of it in the video if you just watch the lecture. Anyway. For instance, the Quran urges both women and men to be modest, and it nowhere explicitly requires that women cover their heads or faces. The practice of veiling is more culture-specific, he says. Muslim women have, at some point, been elected to lead the 3 most populous Muslim countries, Indonesia, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Polygamous unions make up only 1 to 3% of Muslim marriages today. Women are not treated equally to men in the Quran. Lecture 32, Hadith and Sufism. Jinn are spiritual creatures created from fire. We were created from clay. Jinn often cause trouble for us, but they can choose to do good or bad. Page 230, the Hadith are accepted as religiously authoritative, but they are not scripture in the same sense as the Quran. The Hadith are accounts of Muhammad's actions and sayings. This from the video. Muhammad is considered to be sinless, a perfect man who is held up as a model of integrity and good conduct.
Absolutely key.
Even the most trivial seeming details about Muhammad are copied, like how Muhammad smiled a lot. So you're supposed to. Third Caliph Uthman died 656, said that when Muhammad washed, he poured water on his hands 3 times. He washed his mouth, then his face 3 times, right arm to the elbow 3 times, left arm 3 times. Then he wiped his hand over his head. Then he washed his right foot 3 times, left foot 3 times. So that is the way Muslims do it today. Jerusalem is third holiest site after Mecca and Medina. The Dome of the Rock is thought to be the starting point from Muhammad's ascent into heaven. Isnad, chain of sources. Scholars investigated the character and reliability of the sources of the stories about Muhammad in the Hadith. Mona Siddiqui, University of Glasgow.
Siddiqui, just
Okay,
say. If
sorry.
you try to say that Q the way you say it, it sounds as though you're vomiting. So,
Okay. Says it was not the Quran, but the Hadith attributed to Muhammad, which promoted female subservience. And then she gives an example when Muhammad supposedly said, if a man calls his woman to bed and she refuses to come, the angels will continue to curse her until morning. She points out that those stories contradict stories of conjugal love between Muhammad and his wives. The Quran calls for mutual love and understanding in marriage, where husband and wife should be like garments for each other. Ayatollah Khomeini, 1979 revolution in Iran, and led country until he died. He was an Islamic legal scholar.
absolutely.
Clarification of Questions was his book, published in translation in 1984. 3,000 Rulings, example number 2874. It is not unlawful to introduce a man's semen into the uterus of his wife with devices like suction cups. There have been prominent female Sufis. Sharia law, the way. The Quran and Hadith are foundational texts for all Muslims, but the Quran is their only sacred text. Sufi authors, 13th century Persian, Farid al-Din Attar. The Conference of the Birds is a long allegorical poem. The birds, they try to fly to find a mythic bird king. And it's a tough journey, only 30 of them make it there, and when they get there, they don't find the Bird King. Instead, they find a lake where they see their own reflection. So you're supposed to read into the message there. Jalal al-Din Rumi is even more famous. He was born in Afghanistan, moved to Turkey. He was the founder of the Mevlevi order of Sufis, whirling dervishes. He wrote the Mathnawi? I don't know. Page 233. Timbuktu, Mali, was center of Islamic scholarship and learning. There was a library there that Muslims had built and preserved thousands of manuscripts of Quran. I have no idea what that abbreviation is supposed to mean. Something about biographies, maybe, and other subjects such as astronomy, medicine, poetry. Some dated back to 13th century. In 2013, retreating Islamists burned all they found there.
In 2013? Yeah, it's up there.
Lecture
So they
33.
burn their own stuff, not
Yeah.
just other people.
Lecture 33, Baha'i Scriptures. The Baha'i Faith began in 1863 when I can pronounce these things.
Yep.
1817 to 92, announced in Baghdad that he was the prophetic fulfillment of Babism, a 19th century offshoot of Shia Islam. The 12th Imam was hidden by God and will return as the Mahdi, guided one, along with Jesus, to usher in the messianic age of peace, justice, and Islamic law. In 1844, Sayyid Ali Muhammad Shirazi, a 24-year-old Iranian merchant, announced that he was the Bab, the gate, an intermediary between believers and the Mahdi. Later he said he was the Mahdi. The Bab got thousands of followers and then was executed by government in 1850.
Nice government, eh?
Mirza Hussein Ali Nuri gave himself the title of Baha'u'llah, Glory of God, was imprisoned, released, and exiled, and then became leader of the Babis. How do you pronounce that?
Bobbies?
Okay. In
It's probably as good as
1863.
anything. The root is B-A-B-U.
Okay.
Bab. Gate.
In the Garden
See,
of
Babylon
Ridvan.
is a different language,
yeah.
right? Ilan means, Ilani is gods, right?
Baha'u'llah
So it's gate of the gods is what Babylon means.
declared that he was the promised one whose coming was foretold by the Bab. Then most Bab is Babis became Baha'is following Baha'u'llah. The Persian and Ottoman empires weren't thrilled. Baha'u'llah appointed his son Abdullah Baha, 1844 to 1923, as his successor, then a grandson of Abdul, Shohi Effendi, 1897 to 1957 was next. The Bab, Baha'u'llah, and Abdul Baha had a lot of time to write while they were in prison.
Yeah. Nice government, eh?
Tahira was a female missionary and the first to break from Islam. She removed her veil in front of a crowd of men.
Ooh.
In 1852, she was executed as a martyr.
Holy smokes. Removing her veil, that's awful. That was 30 years before my granddad was born, incidentally.
It may not have been. We know is that from this lecture, all we know is that she removed her veil in front of a crowd of men.
Yeah.
And she was the first to break from Islam. So she could have been executed because she broke from Islam.
Absolutely.
Not because she removed her veil. You don't know.
The whole thing is neither should be punished at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
In any case, Baha'i believed in the oneness of God and the oneness of religions. A maiden came to the Bab in a vision, before he was the Bab, to tell him about it. Sounds like Manichaeism to me. Comes out of Islamic background though. They face Akhir. They abstain from alcohol, pray daily, and fast once a month. Their pilgrimage is to Akhir instead of to Mecca. They get executed a lot.
Yeah.
Baha'i.
I wonder how that happened.
Baha'i. Canon is much larger. Reference Baha'i.org. Reference.baha'i.org. Baha'i.org or Baha'i.us for more information. He provided that in the. Several thousand copies have survived of the Book of the Dead. And they were obviously cared about since it would have been really costly to reproduce it. I guess they took great care producing these copies. So anyway, they're not just like run-of-the-mill, whatever.
Today's newspaper.
The Book of the Dead contains magical formulas for preserving the body from snakes or decay, for not having one's heart or head taken away in the realm of the dead, and for reviving one's mummy, thereby enabling it to eat, drink, and breathe. One of the lengthier spells is 125, which describes the judgment of the dead. Weigh the deceased person's heart in a balance against Mat, the principle of truth, morality, and justice represented by an ostrich feather. The list of sins and crimes in the spell. I have not stolen, I have not slain sacred cattle, provide a synopsis of commonly accepted moral principles in ancient Egypt. Spell 17 promises protection and blessings for anyone who reads at least part of the Book of the Dead daily. The Book of the Dead gave power over gods, and you could buy a copy with loved ones' names written in it. So your loved one would be right in there rather than like put name here or whatever. Or I don't know how they. But anyway, so it would have an actual person's name written in. And you could place the scroll inside the coffin with them. And then it would give presumably the spell's magic power or whatever. So anyway, and he even, if you're interested, he reads a spell in there. Well, in English. So, yeah.
He wouldn't know how to pronounce it in Egyptian.
Would anyone?
No, we don't know what the vowels are.
Mayan, 250 to 900 CE, produced books now called codices, made of bark paper folded accordion style with hieroglyphs. The Popol Vuh Council Book recounts creation of world life, events of two sets of twins, corn fire, and more. Hunahpu and Zabalanque are hero twins. Their father and uncle, Hunahpu and Seven Hunahpu, were also twins, and they played a ball game of some kind. The twins became, that was the first set of twins there. They became the sun and moon. So that's all I have. Do you have anything to talk about the last couple lectures?
I don't know.
When I stopped writing notes?
What were you saying about his coverage of a variety of different things?
What? I don't know. What was I saying?
No.
I didn't talk about the last 2 lectures at all.
You were saying was kind of a little more straightforward about the Quran.
Right? I was really impressed. Is that what you mean? Yeah.
I was halfway impressed, which is a whole lot impressed, because he's actually talking about how the strictures against women are pretty strict. And what other things? There were a couple of other things that he pointed out. And then what he's saying, here's where I say he's only halfway there. He says, well, this is just something from the 7th century. Do you recall what it said in there? And
Seal of the Prophets.
Well, not just the seal of the prophets, the perfect guy. Don't make a mistake.
Yeah.
And he's actually the exemplar. You're supposed to follow whatever he did, enjoined. You're supposed to do whatever he did, you're allowed to do.
Well, he said that.
Yeah.
He was, I mean, people are going to read it and see for themselves, but
no, what he said was several times in the book, he said, this was okay in the context of the 7th century.
Well, he's trying to be diplomatic about the whole thing, and I appreciate that personally. I think that, he pointed out, even the Muslims are washing themselves daily the same way, exactly the same as him. So they're going to do everything. What he's saying is they're going to do everything like him without actually pointing out what he did. So you want to find out? You read.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you all the things, and it's not all in the Quran. The really important stuff is what he did. And
that's what he's saying, the Hadith.
Hadith, what he did, also what he said. The most important things actually in the Siras, his biography. There's at least one. I believe more than that. All the stuff is sacred. He's got it a little bit wrong. It's just not as sacred as, I think he got it wrong, sacred as the Quran. Not nearly as sacred.
Not in the same way. I mean, the Quran is directly from God,
as it stands today. You got to read the Quran. You got to read the Hadiths. There's tons of them. But the Siras and the Quran. And a sampling. And not just a nice anodyne, vanilla sampling of the Hadiths. And you want to understand a little bit. There's 4 main interpretations. People will say there's a huge difference in these sorts of things. There's a lot of differences, but it's based. I think you'd find less doctrinal difference in. This is the 2nd biggest religion in the world. If you live long enough, you'll live to see it be the biggest religion in the world, it's the fastest growing religion in the world.
Well, I feel like I'm not going to live long enough today. I feel terrible today.
I feel pretty bad today.
I've been eating all sorts of things I shouldn't have. And like you see me drinking this because I'm really trying to do good. But every once in a while I break down, and like yesterday James brought me back some samples of cheese. That was lovely. And I had a piece of cake. Yeah. And I feel terrible because of it. I can't have things like that.
So the doctrinal differences, because their doctrine is based on what Muhammad did and said, are actually for a religion that's spread, across the world now. It's in pretty well every country in the world, and even traditionally from the Atlantic to the Pacific. The doctrinal differences are impressively, is that the proper word? Few, and it's important to understand that what that dude did and said, it still holds today. There's no, you can come up with a few interpretations. He was talking about this one interpretation. What was it? A modern day interpretation by the Ayatollah. You can do ijtihad, stuff that didn't exist back in his day, Muhammad's day, not Khomeini's day. You can. So the Saudis tried that, right? They tried to get so women could drive because cars didn't exist 1,400 years ago, right? And at first it was voted down. I think that it's gotten in now. And you see, the Saudis aren't nearly as bad as they're portrayed. The people that they hang with, the Wahhabis, are pretty darn bad. But the Saudis, they're saying, how can we hold on to power? They don't really care that much about the religion from what I can tell, but they want to hang with the Wahhabis because they've got this kind of like pact with them. It's a long-standing thing. It might go back to the 18th century, 1700s, and stuff like that. So they hang with them, and they kind of let them do their religious stuff, and they do their stuff. And they're saying, geez, if they've got any sense, and the guy in power now doesn't have much sense, but they're going along saying, geez, we're falling behind. And guess what? They are. They're, like in Pakistan, they've fallen so far behind India. It's incredible. And India's kind of following a little bit behind China. It looks like you can't trust everything.
Well,
that's coming
and
out
you
of
raised a
China.
good point about religion. Really, much of it, I think, is just a means for the few to govern the many.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, especially in Islam. Islam, the whole idea is there's no separation of church and state. And Bertrand Russell, a long time ago, pointed it out. This has been about 1918, somewhere like that. So over 100 years ago, a little over. He said, I think that it was just after, it was roughly 100 years ago. I got to be careful. But he was saying, the belief system that's closest to, he's talking about Bolshevism. This is a year or two after the Russian Revolution. He was saying that the one that's closest to it is, we call it Bolshevism, is Islam. Because, and he pointed that out, I think that was the main thing, it's just no separation of church and state. In case of Bolshevism, there's no separation of party and state, but it's a similar sort of thing. Politics hangs with the belief system. So I don't make any distinction between belief system and religion.
A lot of the time, like, we see that religions, say Christianity, for example, kind of bouncing a little bit off of Judaism and stuff like that, and then
it comes out of
Islam
Judaism.
Kind of bouncing off probably Manichaeism, and I don't know.
No.
A reaction to?
Well, it's a reaction to a lot of things surrounding it, right? So they've
okay.
actually got Jews surrounding them. People have converted to Judaism in Arabia, and they've got Christians who've converted around them. In the center, it's paganism, right?
Okay.
And I don't know if you really knew much about Zoroastrianism, but maybe Manichaeism.
Anyway.
But the important thing to understand about Christianity is Jesus was a Jew. All but one of the apostles, and we're not even sure about that last one, were Jews. So it is Christianity is Judaism. Here's Leonard Cohen, who was born a Jew and was like a practicing Buddhist, said he's being at least somewhat ironic. I always consider Christianity the converting arm of Judaism. I'm going, yeah, that's when I was a young public, wow, that's a fascinating, because it comes out of Judaism. Islam doesn't. And when it takes this stuff, you see, Christianity is semi-respectful towards the old scriptures, the Hebrew scriptures. Islam isn't. It's intolerant. It says, my understanding of the translations is, you've got to be careful about translations, I'll be checking this up, is that the compilers of the Old and New Testament, as they exist now, for Christians and for Jews, for both of them, lied. Okay? That is horrible appropriation. When you take stories and they disagree with the original documents, now he's taken some stuff like Thomas, the Gospel of Thomas and stuff like that. But when you're saying they lie, the people who came up with the present document, that is intolerable tolerance. And understand, what he's saying goes now. Doesn't matter what some religious studies person tells you and stuff like that. And that religious studies person might be a Muslim. He's not telling the truth, he's a Muslim. There is huge intolerance there. It's appropriation with disrespect when this guy says, and this is what you're taught in religious studies.
This guy isn't disrespectful.
No.
You don't mean him.
No.
Because he was wonderful.
No. He's too respectful of a certain aspect in lots of different religions, and not just Mormonism, what looks to be his own religion. So, like Pauline reported here, and she reported it accurately, Jerusalem is considered, at least in the Sunni tradition, Shia tradition, I'd question it, the third most sacred site, Temple Mount in particular, in Islam. What would happen if we took the Carmen Gay medicine wheel? If some religion came along, some Wicca type of thing, and said, that's our third most holy site, we're actually going to squat on top of there, that would be considered huge appropriation, and rightly so. You can't go along and take someone else's holy site.
Well, and
one
mentioning
they've had for 1,400 years.
Okay, but remember when we were talking about the origins of Mormonism and the plates in the hill and stuff like that, I was reminded of the Native American course that we break course that we listened to earlier this, I think it was spring, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And they were talking about the Native American. They were sort of like, well, they were hills, but they were sort of like burial pyramids. The way
They're
that they
mounds.
hit, yeah, they
we
put
don't-
their,
I guess some
they
of them
put all
would be
sorts of
burials
treasures in
and
there and
like that.
stuff,
Exactly
right?
And
so
Mormons appropriating
I
that
was
sort of
thinking
stuff. Bad
that
on you guys, right?
probably those
That
those
doesn't-
things
yeah.
were Native American artifacts
Oh, they
that
were
he was
bad on
digging
you
up,
Mormons. Bad on you Muslims.
mean,
you know?
and it
Bad
just
on
makes
anyone who
sense to
builds
me.
on someone else, who
And so I'm
steals
thinking,
someone
well,
else's sites.
I'm thinking, well, when he dug these things up, well, I mean, if you, like me, actually believe that he did dig up these things to read, because I think he did. I don't think he kept them around because at the time he was hanging with a learned fellow who was translating at the end.
Seminary.
And then they disappeared, right?
Yeah.
The things disappear. Oh, taken up to heaven again by Gabriel. But I mean, the learned fellow probably thought, okay, yeah, we can't be hanging on to these things because it's going to be found out that they're not actually what we say they are, right? But in any case, I hope you put them back in the mound, you know, like
I
rather than
understand
melted
that was
them
a
down
long
or
time
whatever.
ago. I think they've got a serpent mound there that they bought up and things like that. Some sort of mound. And, yeah, it's inappropriate, and things like that. You know, like
I feel so bad for the Native Americans.
Exactly
that
right. Yeah,
lost
yeah.
so much
people
stuff.
who have got or natives have actually got special rights. The most important one is respect. Yeah, that's 2 syllables, both of them accented in this context. Respect, and you can't go appropriating other people's holy sites and get my respect. So the thing is, if it's your third holy site, shh, don't tell me. I don't want to know about it. Don't go announcing to the world and expect me to respect your claims to it. You don't have any claim to that. The best thing to do is to be quiet about it.
Anyway, whatever. I fully enjoyed the this great course. I think everyone needs to watch it. And I guess we're not going to hear about those last 2 lectures. That's fine.
Anyway. Okay, I got to be going.
Yep.